The briefers have concluded they're now taking questions, and it's very clear to me that these people had no plan. We're getting an operational briefing for people who were not prepared for the operation. The current situation in Afghanistan is very dissimilar to 9/11. In 9/11, there were a variety of things that broke down throughout the intelligence community that had a tragic outcome. But the outcomes we see in Afghanistan today are principally driven by one flawed assumption, that the Afghan government and that the Afghan military would ever fight. We send the Department of Defense off for thousands of studies in the National Defense Authorization Act, and they appear to have studied everything except what actually happened, which was an immediate Taliban takeover. This is a total failure of nation building. It's a total failure of neoconservatism, and it's our hope that going forward we'll actually get a team in place that knows what the hell is happening in Afghanistan. Because that group of people, they didn't know what was going on beforehand. They had this flawed assumption that the Afghan government would fight, and it's particularly frustrating to continue to hear the intel professionals tell us a different thing than the DoD officials. We can't get into the specifics of what we heard, but I heard very different assessments from the DNI than I heard from the Secretary of State and from the Secretary of Defense. Congresswoman Greene?
Thank you. What I just heard in there is beyond appalling to me. What Americans need to know at home is this administration has failed you on every single level. Now, everyone knows there are Americans trapped in Afghanistan, but this was Joe Biden's fault, Kamala Harris's fault, and all of his administration and those in charge. Their plan to withdraw was completely irresponsible. They had the information, and they knew what they were going to do was going to create this crisis. Now, there is no trust in an administration that would do this to our very young people. This is not a political issue. I do not care about Republican or Democrat. We should all be focused on Americans stranded in Afghanistan and our Afghan allies. But Americans come first. That is what should be number one. I'm also purely disgusted at Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats calling us back here to talk about passing bills when our sole focus should be on getting Americans out of Afghanistan. I have no trust. I have no confidence in this administration. Every single one of them should resign. And America needs new leadership that actually cares about our people, our children, our grandchildren, and all of our money. Those people making decisions on what has happened are the same people in charge for decades now. And look at where we are. It is time for America to say enough. And that is why I'm walking out here to say this to you all. Everyone should be appalled. Everyone should be demanding for them to resign. I demand for them to resign. They have failed America, and I'm fed up with it. Thank you.
How many Americans are left in Afghanistan that need to be repatriated? Did they give you specific?
I did not hear anything in that briefing different from what we heard from many of these officials on the Sunday shows, which was a great deal of confusion and poor record keeping and insufficient efforts to try to fill in those informational gaps.
Have they said how many, as of today, have been repatriated?
That would get into specifics that we would be remiss to discuss.
Beyond resignations, what do you guys want to see? What would be your recommendations as members of Congress for how they could fix part of what is going on there?
Well, any trust in whatever remnants of the former Afghan government that were propped up is misplaced. Any trust in the Taliban to be able to deliver security outcomes for our fellow Americans is misplaced. I stand before you not as a principal critic of Afghanistan withdrawal. I'm a member of the Armed Services Committee. I've been one of the loudest Republicans on the Armed Services Committee in support of President Biden's decision to withdraw. So I don't critique that at all. It is the intelligence failure and it is the operational failure that those men principally in that room led, and they failed. How are we supposed to take the word of Lloyd Austin and General Milley on what's going on in Afghanistan when they didn't even plan for the Taliban takeover that so many of us knew was inevitable? I think that a change in personnel would go a long way to building confidence in an evacuation strategy.
Is there a conversation in there about, that you could share about extending that August 31st?
That'd be a little more specific than we'd be able to get. Chad?
Thank you. This follows from the idea, and I know your position on withdrawing from Afghanistan prior to this case, but your minds weren't already made up about criticizing the administration. And we heard some of your remarks yesterday, Ms. Greene, about Afghanistan. But were your minds not made up ahead of this, what you were going to say, regardless of what you heard?
No, look, we are always hopeful that people will bring an actual plan informed by the facts on the ground. What we've seen from Secretary Austin and General Milley is a total lack of understanding about Afghanistan, and it's not just them. It's political leadership of yesteryear, it's military leadership of yesteryear. How many briefings has this Congress gotten about the built-up capabilities of the Afghan government or the Afghan military? It was all a lie. That was the big lie. You want to talk about a big lie that's been told in this town? It's that the Afghan military was ever going to stand and fight, that government was ever going to hold. And we knew that it wouldn't. That's why we supported President Biden's decision to withdraw, but to not plan for the eventuality and to still have no plan is an insult to our country, and it is particularly problematic for Americans who are still now behind enemy lines.
Congressman Greene, you talked about evacuating Afghan allies. Would you support potentially taking tens of thousands or even possibly over 100,000 of these Afghan SIV applicants into the U.S.?
My biggest focus is American citizens. I think our Afghan allies have to be properly vetted before they're brought in the United States. I will solidly stand on my America First platform, but American citizens should be prioritized. They should be number one, and then Afghan allies should be vetted properly. That was the former plan that was in place that President Joe Biden cast to the side, and the rest of those that are supposedly in charge. I'd also like to say our military that are working so hard, they are doing the real job and they deserve all the recognition. None of those leaders are leaders. It's the people on the ground that are doing everything they can to rescue Americans and also work with Afghan allies to get them out and vetted properly. I can't even imagine what they're going through. They've probably had no sleep. They can barely eat. It is a true crisis over there, and it is this, I can't even call it leadership, failure. It's this failure that has put our great military in this place, and God, I pray there's no veteran suicides over this. I can't even imagine this generation, our generation, for almost 20 years has been going back and back and back to Afghanistan and Iraq and all these places. It's shameful. They should not be treated this way. And that is why these people should resign. They have failed our country and failed our military.
Your governor,
When should hearings begin? When do you think hearings should begin on this?
Immediately. These people need to resign. We need to replace them with people that can do this job and do it correctly, because they've already proven that they cannot do
Do you
it.
have people in mind for who would replace them? Because, I mean, they were both former active military. They've been around for years.
They're more interested in woke issues than safety and security.
They've been around
of
for
our
years,
country.
but Secretary Austin has failed up. Wasn't it Secretary Austin when he was a general who was put in charge of building a strident Syrian force to take on Assad? And he took $48 million and trained 4 or 5 fighters who survived first contact with the enemy. You know, when the DOD is sending people to brief Congress, they aren't sending their best in these two. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Gaetz.